Hi, everybody. Steve Alton here. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we're going to finish up our discussion on the Dunning-Kruger effect and, in particular, how it resonates or overlaps with a narcissistic personality disorder. So as we move to different areas of the change grid, we can identify all sorts of mental issues, challenges, illnesses, whatever, that one might encounter there. And we can look at where a particular bias might live or a particular fallacy when it comes to the way we're looking at something, logical fallacy. We can see where a lot of these things overlay. Now, starting on Thursday, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the world of empaths. And I also want people to kind of understand where empathy, I don't want to say empathy because that feels more like, we care about somebody. I'm saying there are people who feel it very, very deeply. Those people are empaths. And where does that empathic skill, I guess, gift, perhaps, where does that live on the change grid? And how does that in turn affect how people might be approaching and utilizing their gift of empathic connection, I guess is a word I'll use. I didn't want to use empathy. So, hey, Chris, how are you? So now, Chris, am I correct that you originally sent this over about Dunning-Kruger, or am I misremembering?
Yeah, I think it could have been Tim, or it wasn't me that originally sent this conversation over.
Oh, I know what you sent over. Yes, yes, yes. A couple of conversations ago, we looked at your results from business chemistry.
Yeah,
Did you happen to watch that video up on YouTube yet?
I did.
All
I
right. And
did. It was very interesting.
yeah, and we know that you shared that you were going to go through the certification class on that. So we'll be very interested in hearing if there's more than meets the eye. Because as we said towards the end of that particular call, it was all fine and good. And it was all, I mean, what it is, it is. It's, no problems on there. But I don't know that it's in any way particularly unique. I don't know that it's doing anything that a dozen other instruments can't already do. So it'll be very interesting to hear your feedback after going through certification. And I'm going to assume they're going to give you the deep, deep dive into what makes it particularly unique.
Yeah, and it was such a great session, confirmed all my suspicions that I was having, that it's really general and it's not really a game changer for the industry. I thought it was going to be much more because of who Deloitte is, but in
Yeah,
some of the conversations we've been having and taking a look at it, I'm interested in the certification just to get a deeper dive, just to see if
yeah,
there's
yeah.
something I'm missing here.
Yeah, and again, it gives you an opportunity to meet with a lot of other people who are getting certified or who are already certified. And as we said on that recording, they're all going to end up in the same place. And that's going to be with a now what. And the moment that question, now what, appears, you've got a space for the change grid to be put into play.
Absolutely.
It's great the tools create awareness. And again, we talk about psychometric tools are descriptive. Well, no, they could be descriptive, they could be predictive, they could be prescriptive. But as far as we know, we're the only one that does all three of those. And most very much shy away from prescription. But that's the real work. I mean, how does the change occur if nothing changes, So somebody's got to prescribe a course of action for one to pursue. So that's the way it is.
So
Anyway,
I have a question for you about this, about the Dunning-Kruger, because was it originally conducted around assessments or not? Because I think that was the initial, my initial understanding. It was conducting, that it was
oh,
created just because of how people take when they take assessments. That's how
that
they view themselves.
yeah, that's interesting. Just one second. I've got chat open because I had a list I'd put together. So how did the Dunning-Kruger effect get studied initially? Let's see what chat has to say about that. Well, let me just slide this over into the main window so you guys can kind of read along. The Dunning-Kruger effect was first studied and documented. Yeah. Research paper 1999. Unskilled and unaware of it, how difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence lead to inflated self-assessments. So the researchers conducted a series of experiments to explore the phenomenon of individuals' lack of self-awareness about their own incompetence in various tasks. The initial studies involved tasks related to humor, logic, grammar, and English skills. They were asked to complete tasks, then rate their own performance. Dunning-Kruger found that participants who performed poorly on these tasks tended to overestimate their performance and competence, while those who performed well tended to underestimate their performance. In other words, those who were the least skilled in a particular area were the most likely to overestimate their abilities. The researchers proposed that this phenomenon occurred because individuals who lack the necessary skills also lack the expertise to accurately assess their own performance. Well, that makes sense. Their cognitive limitations prevented them from recognizing their own deficiencies. Okay, blah, blah, blah. It's been replicated, extended to various domains, an important concept in psychology and self-awareness, learning, and expertise. Yeah, so I suppose chat could give us deeper insights into exactly how these studies were performed. But yeah, that seems to be the essence of how it all came to be. Now, last time around, I was very curious to know, well, how does the Dunning-Kruger effect resonate with narcissistic tendencies or a narcissistic personality disorder? So anyone want to predict? What do you think? Do you think narcissists are more or less likely to exhibit this Dunning-Kruger phenomenon where they overestimate and overrepresent whatever their abilities are, or as they said, maybe if they're really, really good, would underestimate it? Do you guys think narcissists have a tendency to underrepresent their abilities or
No, I
underrepresent?
think it's overestimated, particularly when they say they're a stable genius, but can't see the simple facts in front of them.
There you go. There you go. All right. So yeah, we are going to talk a lot about the people out there that we do notice exhibiting either Dunning-Kruger or exhibiting narcissistic tendencies. As we do this, keep in mind that this is also a test for all of you to see how well you can detach from whatever your personal thoughts, feelings, positions happen to be, so that you can simply observe and report upon what you are noticing about others or specific individuals in the population as the time kind of goes along. Because we're interested here in patterns. Can we see these patterns unfolding? And do we believe these patterns are just a fluke kind of a thing? Is it something that gets practiced over and over again and becomes more and more deeply entrenched in the way the person views the world and presents themselves to the world? You know, what's really going on with the whole sort of thing? Now, one of the things that I did ask specifically ChatGPT was, what's the big difference between the Dunning-Kruger effect and the narcissistic personality disorder? And this is what it said, is that the Dunning-Kruger effect and narcissist, I'll just slide this in so you guys can kind of look at it as well. The Dunning-Kruger effect and narcissistic personality disorder are related, but not the same. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where individuals with limited abilities in a specific domain tend to overestimate their competence in that area, regardless of their overall personality traits. It's more of a cognitive phenomenon related to self-perception and self-assessment. On the other hand, a narcissistic personality disorder is a psychological condition characterized by a pattern of grandiosity. It's grandiose. I'm going to say it's grandiosity. Anyway, grandiosity, a need for admiration and a lack of empathy for others. People with a narcissistic personality disorder often have inflated sense of self-importance and may exaggerate their achievements and abilities across multiple domains, not just in a specific area. They tend to see constant admiration and have a strong need for validation from others. So it does say that while there might be a connection between the two, I would say to you that just because someone has some Dunning-Kruger uh, experiences, situations, reactions, responses, doesn't mean they have a narcissistic personality disorder. But I would say to you that people with NPD have a very strong likelihood of exhibiting the Dunning-Kruger effect. Would you guys agree with that? Disagree with that?
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yep. And so
Do you think it's possible?
yeah, David, you're garbly, so
Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I'm just asking if you believe it's possible for someone who's not a narcissist to create their own narcissism.
Oh, yeah. I think that a lot of narcissism is something people fall into. You know, for example, a kid who is for their whole life has been told how smart they are and how good they are and blah, 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 is likely to have that impact their sense of self. Whether that those kudos that the parents who were giving this kid were fairly given, or were correctly given, or just trying to boost the kid up, it's still going to create within that individual this thought that what they've been told is actually true. And so I do believe some people just kind of accidentally fall into some sort of a Dunning-Kruger world map. And I do think that there's also other people who who are exhibiting it extensively and have no idea that they're even doing it. So I don't know, until it becomes conscious, I don't know that I can actually do it deliberately. So I know I'm babbling, but my thought is that the vast majority of Dunning-Kruger situations we encounter, the individual involved is oblivious to the fact that their assessment is wrong. You guys agree with that? Disagree with that? Thoughts about that? Somebody unmute, say something. So yeah, all right. Well then, fine. Being quiet is agreement. So so there we go. Now, I do think it's important for us to be able to recognize when we are encountering. Oh, go ahead, David.
No, to be here for you if you ask that question.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate it. A little feedback's a good thing. Our crowd today is rather small, so we'll see how it all rolls out. But I just wanted to finish this because I really want to get into the big topic starting on Thursday. So what I wanted to basically say is that there is a reason why it's important for those of us that are in the human development industry in particular, and I believe for the more enlightened general public, to be able to recognize when they are encountering someone in the midst of a Dunning-Kruger effect, or someone who is dealing with narcissism. And the reason for it is because we have to be able to detach ourselves in these situations so that we don't get sucked into their I'm going to say drama, but inside of their fantasy world. It's not just a drama. They have a fantasy about themselves that does not match whatever the reality of the situation happens to be. There are people who can be pulled under the spell of someone's Dunning-Kruger effect, or pulled under the spell of the narcissistic behavior. They come to believe, because those two situations both involve an individual who deeply believes that they have these abilities or whatever, and because they deeply believe it, they present themselves to the world as though this is a matter of absolute truth, absolute fact. And there's a certain segment of the population who can easily get, what do I want to say, romanced into it, can get drawn to it, can get somehow or another pulled under that spell, if you will. And as a result, they become
P.T. Barnum effect.
exactly. Exactly. And so they become very much what I want to say, unknowingly set up as victims, or the worst case scenario, they're perpetuating whatever the misunderstanding, the misrepresentation. I don't want to call it a lie, because a lie is a conscious thing. I don't know that people who are saying things that are untrue but are unaware of the fact that what they're saying is untrue are necessarily lying. If you guys agree with me on that, to me, a lie is a conscious, deliberate act, a purposeful misrepresentation of the truth. Where somebody's just plain clueless and oblivious, may be sharing all kinds of inaccuracies, but do they know that they're sharing inaccuracies?
Would you say that this effect is more likely to occur down grid and out grid?
I think that's a really good question. And I think it's going to change as we move around the grid. So, for example, I would say to you that I believe that anyone who is under the spell of Dunning-Kruger or narcissism, probably carries within them a consistent self-assessment that their ability is what, on the higher end of the scale or the lower end of the scale?
Higher.
Higher. And so right there, if we're saying like, no, if I'm a narcissist, I'm going to think my ability is really quite high. And if I'm dealing with Dunning-Kruger, by definition, I perceive my ability as being quite high. Whether I'm right or wrong, that's the next little question. But nevertheless, I enter this drama with the belief that my ability is very, very high. Now, I believe that when it comes to perceived challenge, we are likely to encounter a full spectrum of things. So certainly, as the perceived level of challenge goes down, we're probably going to find let's say a lot more quiet Dunning-Kruger sort of effect. If people have a pattern of that appearing in multiple kinds of situations, it may very well be that that's just how they believe. We do often describe the person who's in the down grid section of the change grid, down in power apathy, in particular in apathy, as suffering from an illusion of control. And so that illusion of control does seem to resonate with this thought that your ability is not as high as you think it is. Nevertheless, you think it's very, very high. And so you think the challenge is very, very low. So I think we can find a lot of that Dunning-Kruger sorts of stuff happening down grid. But
when somebody runs into a pattern interrupt, in other words, they believe they're really strong and they get disproven, what happens?
Well, I believe that this is where the test of the narcissistic personality disorder is going to come up. Someone who simply is suffering from a Dunning-Kruger effect may very well go, that's interesting, I didn't know that. Particularly if you can show them some sort of supportive evidence or whatever, I think that they are much more receptive and willing to learn and ultimately change their self-perception. Where someone with a narcissistic personality disorder can't do that. Because for them to acknowledge that there is information they didn't already have, that there is wisdom that was not theirs to begin with, this is going to reveal a chink in the armor. It's going to reveal something about them that a narcissist would never want to have revealed. So because that exposure would undermine the narcissist's personal beliefs about themselves and how they are being perceived by the world, they are far more likely to reach out and attack anyone or anything that is drawing question about their ability. So if it's simple Dunning-Kruger, I say yes, it's probably a workable situation. But if it's a narcissistic personality disorder, it may take far deeper work for a far longer period of time, and it may not be in our individual wheelhouses to do that kind of work. Thoughts? Others?
I agree.
Okay, good. Chris, Shaxton, feel free to unmute and chime in if you've got something you'd like to kind of share around this. But that's what
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So now, I think that we want to be able to look at some specific characteristics of what this narcissistic personality disorder really contains, carries, etc. What did I do with that? There, you must be it. And so we started talking about Dunning-Kruger. And one of the things that I then said was, all right, I want to know, does Donald Trump show evidence of a narcissistic personality disorder? Now, let me be really clear. This conversation is not about anyone's personal opinions or political viewpoints on Donald Trump, pro, con, whatever. I want to say we are human development professionals. We need to exercise our skill to see things as they are, not so much what we see and what it's going to mean, et cetera. That's another question about, does it predict future behavior and all that? But do we see any of these attributes or patterns in a particular individual? Right now, I asked about Donald Trump, but there are countless people. I would actually say to you, without doing any research on it, that the world of politics is filled with narcissists. So right there, it's like we can pretty much go, well, obviously anyone who's in that realm, has a very high opinion of themselves and what they're able to do. I would not be at all surprised to learn that they think that they and only they are well positioned to do those sorts of things. And, a lot of the other things, we're about to look at the characteristics of a narcissist and see how many of those are true. But I don't think it's just Donald Trump. I just think Donald Trump has an amazing ability to draw attention to himself or draw scrutiny to himself. And so whatever reasons that is, don't know. But again, as we have this discussion, I really wanted to focus on your abilities to recognize characteristics instead of, taking the conversation into other areas that we could certainly discuss. Fair enough? Fair enough. So
Yeah, it's too bad Brian's not on the call. He'd be very proud of Chat GPT's response.
yeah, I mean, look at this, because what Chat basically says, my gosh, is Chat GPT like been programmed to be as diplomatic as you can be? Oh, yeah, they are. And so first thing it says is, I'm an AI language model. I can't make diagnoses. It would be inappropriate to do so without conducting a formal assessment. Blah, 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 blah. But then it can go in and say, during his time as a public figure, some mental health professionals and experts have publicly expressed their opinions. And so again, they're telling us there's some background on it, but armchair diagnoses, especially of public figures, can have ethical implications, blah, blah, blah. So I got to a point where I said, well, that was all very diplomatic, but it didn't answer the question. Does Donald Trump's behavior from your research provide any supportive evidence that he is a narcissist? And again, it's going to start off with this little thing. And by the way, it's also going to tell us that it doesn't know anything about anything that happened after September 2021. So they really, for Chat GPT to continue to hold front runner position, it's got to be updated in what it all knows. But it can certainly share some things about it. So some of the observed behaviors and characteristics that have led to speculation about NPD include a perceived sense of grandiosity. I'd be curious to know, which one is it? Do you think this happens spontaneously or spontaneously? Is it spontaneity or spontaneity? Okay, anyway, a strong desire for admiration and attention, a tendency to exaggerate achievements, difficulty accepting criticism, a sense of entitlement, and a lack of empathy towards others. Now, again, the important thing for me, as we start to have these deeper discussions where we are applying the principles that we're talking about to what's happening out there right now, we have to be able to talk about specific individuals or specific interactions that are happening between individuals, and at the same time, make sure that we can detach ourselves from it. It is very important that we develop the ability to simply not feel anything about the situation, but to rather observe what it is there is to observe, try to understand what there is to be understood, and then from that perspective, maybe we can make some conclusions or whatever the case may be. Okay, so fair enough. I'm not going to harp on it, but it's really important that we stay clear about this. Now, let's kind of go into a little other thing. That's about how they protect themselves. All right, yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about. Now, again, right now, the subject is Donald Trump. We could choose any other individual, and I'm happy to do that, whatever you guys want. But right now, we're talking about Donald Trump. And I'm going to ask you guys, in your exposure to the news, to the whatever, and we have to go in accepting that every American knows a teeny tiny fraction of what's actually going on. We only know what we have heard about through other sources because we're not there. Okay, we're not directly observing the person. We're not in that environment. So everything that we are learning secondhand. It's coming to us through second or third parties. And so we have to be also, I think, aware of the fact that whatever we understand, we are understanding only through the lens of what we have seen, heard, or experienced as we go our way through this. So, nevertheless, let's kind of look at this. So, grandiosity, and bragging. People within PD often exaggerate their achievements. And by the way, this is how do people with a narcissistic personality disorder basically protect themselves? So how do they protect their self-image? How do they maintain their sense of superiority? What are their defense mechanisms? And by the way, again, it's even saying here, they're often unconscious and aimed at avoiding any threats to their self-esteem. So here are some common ways that people can do that. And so I'm bringing this up just to say that sometimes we can identify what's going on with a person because they match the description of what that kind of person does. But we can also learn about a person or perhaps get closer to a diagnosis by seeing if they are behaving in the ways that people who had a particular condition would behave if they felt threatened, undermined, whatever. And so that's what this is really all about. Yeah, so here we go. And Shags, you are correct here, there that the question is, of these 10, how many of these have you guys heard about, read about, whatever about when it comes to Donald Trump personally? So grandiosity and bragging. People within PD often exaggerate their achievements, talents, and importance to reinforce their self-image of superiority. They may constantly seek validation and admiration from others. Have we heard, seen anything along this line? Yay or nay are your options there? Okay, so yeah, there we go. Okay, so all right, Shags, I'm hearing, I'm seeing some emotion connected there.
AT.
So yes, he does mock. You are correct. Yes. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, question. So are we factoring in when we do this type of analysis, how much of this is the person and how much of this is the position, right? Because some positions by nature, that's a part of it. So like you talked about politicians, for them to boast or for them to highlight and exaggerate on accomplishments is like par for course.
You are absolutely right. That's why earlier, last time around, one of the things I discussed was the importance of observation as a key way of really understanding what's truth about a person. So if we can observe someone for a long period of time in a wide variety of situations, and across that whole range of time and experience, we see consistency in behaviors, choices, etc. Now we can say, well, that's really more the person, as opposed to in some sort of an isolated experience with somebody trying to draw a conclusion about who this person is, what this person is really all about. So let me give you an example of this. very, very frequently over my career, being a speaker, getting up in front of big audiences, doing what all of us seem to do. It's amazing how many people come to hold the belief that I'm an extrovert. They come to hold the belief that I am passionate about my work and passionate about the things that I have to share, that I am on a mission and on and on. They're bestowing upon me a whole lot of qualities that, what do you think the truth is? It's not me. I'm not an extrovert. I'm a deep introvert. I really don't have a lot of passion about my life's work. Otherwise, I think I would have taken it to a very different level of deployment, built a huge company, because I do believe what we've put together over all these years is at least as good as what Blanchard has put together. But Blanchard is many, 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 oh my gosh, times bigger than what it is. That's not me. I don't have that level of passion around it. I don't have that level of ambition. I don't, but in the moment, I can certainly understand that for me to do the most effective job of communicating these principles to people, I need to be passionate about it in the moment. I need to be very expressive and energized and outgoing. I need to be able to field questions and not kind of just go, oh, I don't even want to talk about it. I need to like be there and do whatever it needs to be. So if anyone walks away from one of my presentations and thinks that I'm a highly passionate extrovert and blah, 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 no, that's just how I happen to have behaved because that's what the situation at hand required. So Tim, does that resonate with what you were, or Chris, did that resonate with what you guys were
It does. It does. I just often think about sometimes from an objective perspective as well. Prior to running for president, and I have no dog in this fight, trust me on this. But having one of the highest rated television shows, one of the thought leaders for sales and for business, so prior to that, it's like there's a shift, right? And I don't think sometimes we take into account what it was like prior to a certain point if we're determining long-term history
Yeah.
of a person. So
right. I think you're absolutely right. So again, if we really want to get to the truth, this is why, and I'm sure this is why even ChatGPT said, look, you can't do this as from an armchair. This requires you to do some very deep psychological studies and on and on and on. So, we acknowledge that to absolutely be true. Nevertheless, all day, every day, people with very minimal exposures to others form opinions, and those opinions become reality for that person, right? The person who's experienced the perception. So some might experience, in fact, it's absolutely true, some people experience Donald Trump and are left feeling profoundly positive, and others observe Donald Trump and feel profoundly negative. So I think a lot of it also has to do with the individuals that are performing these assessments that draw them to the decision that X is true. And so this is what I'm saying from attention management perspective, or from a perspective of the Oracle, the self, we have to recognize that we are all susceptible to getting sucked in to someone else's world, that we can get romanced, influenced, persuaded, or manipulated into holding a set of beliefs that in truth have little, if any, evidence to support them. Nevertheless, we got sucked in. We're under the spell of what's going on. So should the burden be placed on the individual who is exhibiting these kinds of behaviors, or really should the burden be on the individual members of the general public, who are ultimately the ones that are coming to these conclusions and then adjusting their behavior accordingly? Wow, that was a lot of words. So, thoughts about that? No? All right. So,
yeah, I agree.
yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So let's do a quick list down this. These are how someone with a true narcissistic personality disorder would go about protecting themselves. So that first one about bragging, presenting themselves as someone who is very important to be able to do it, that's number one. I have personally seen plenty of evidence of that, even when recently, Donald Trump has been quoted as saying that he could stop the war in the Ukraine in 24 hours flat. Well, that's positioning oneself as having tremendous talent, tremendous importance to again do this. So I think we've seen plenty of evidence about that one. Number two, entitlement. Entitlement. Individuals with NPD may feel entitled to special treatment and privileges, believing that they deserve more than others due to their perceived exceptional qualities. I think we've seen plenty of evidence of that. If you guys would like, I can certainly give you evidence of any of these, but I'm more curious to hear what evidence you guys might have observed. A lack of empathy. To protect their self-image, they may display a lack of empathy towards others, dismissing their feelings or needs as unimportant. Certainly, we've seen evidence of that. Avoidance of criticism. Those with NPD may become defensive and react negatively when faced with criticism or feedback that challenges their self-image. Number five, idealization and devaluation. They might engage in a pattern of idealizing others, so putting others up on a pedestal initially, and then devaluing them later if they feel threatened or perceive them as less valuable. This also falls into the category of throwing people under the bus. So anyone so far can you come up with some sort of evidence or whatever for each one of these? I'm going to believe the answer is yes. Projection. Individuals with NPD may project their own flaws and insecurities onto others, attributing negative traits to those around them to protect themselves from acknowledging their own shortcomings. You do find a lot of this. It also takes the form of the person with NPD or the people that are around them that have fallen under the spell have a tendency to attack another group using labels and identifying behaviors that the narcissists themselves are actually displaying. And so it's almost as though they're projecting onto others. Oh, look at the next one. They're projecting onto others and they don't really see that what they're looking at is a reflection of themselves. Next one, control and manipulation. They may use controlling and manipulative tactics to maintain a sense of power and dominance in their relationships. So we've seen that. Isolating themselves to avoid potential criticism or rejection. They may distance themselves from people who challenge their self-image and prefer to associate with those who provide constant admiration. So what I kind of see about this is also the flip side of it, and that's that rather than isolating yourself, which to me means pulling back to you being more alone, I think they instead build circles of people around them, crowds around them that will continue to laud them with all of the praise and positive feedback they possibly can. So it's more about building that crowd around you sometimes in order to have that admiration, as opposed to distancing yourself. So
That sounds like a lot like athletes.
Yeah, tell us about that, David.
Well, it's boxers are famous for blowing all their money on their entourage. They make millions of dollars from a fight, but they have 100 people in their entourage that they have to take out and take care of. Yeah. And they just they blow it.
They travel with their royal court. The king traveled with his court. And so this is a behavior that certainly we can see going on. And by the way, did I just say that a great many kings and queens and leaders of countries are probably narcissists? I believe I did. So, and again, going to the point that maybe that's part of the role. Maybe you need to have a little bit of that positive energy or positive self-assessment. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but there's a difference between someone consciously saying, in order for the public that I serve to trust me and know that they can count on me, I need to tell them, not only in my words, but in my actions, that I am trustworthy, that I am someone that they can count on, that I am doing these things. And so I can certainly see how someone with a lot of emotional intelligence understands that they may very well have to present themselves as someone who is confident in situations where they are actually tentative, but they can't project being tentative to the people that they serve. They have to project that they're strong. Those of you that are in serious long-term relationships, particularly those of you that are parents, I am sure there's been plenty of times in your history that you've said, I can't let my family show that I'm concerned about this or that. It's also a really big thing about the difference between men and women. Men know we're providers and protectors. So we can't let someone that we're supposed to be providing for and protecting know that we're scared. And so, of course, we're going to put forth the best face. We're going to, what do I say, fake it till we make it, or whatever words you want to, attach to that. So I get it. There are times that a certain bit of this, but the distinction I would want to make there is that there's a difference between doing it consciously, deliberately, intentionally, with purpose, and doing it because it's part of your inherent personality and whatever mental challenges come along with all that. Can you guys make that distinction easily enough? Yeah, yep. All right, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, do you guys, if you're on an airplane and the airplane's having mechanical trouble and you're mid-flight, do you want to have the captain come over the PA and say, well, we're all doomed? No, no, we need them in that moment to project to everyone that they have tremendous confidence, even though for all I know, they've never experienced this sort of a situation outside of a simulator, perhaps. They're hoping for the best. So they can't project that. So I get there is a distinction between doing it deliberately and having a personality disorder. Okay, so we get a little bit further down. Isolating themselves, avoiding vulnerability. Individuals within PD often avoid situations that might make them feel vulnerable or expose their weaknesses. I will just give you one example of this out of Donald Trump's behavior in recent months. He doesn't want to debate. And so now, of course, he's presenting it that there's no reason for him to have to participate in a debate. He's a front runner and blah, blah, blah. But I would say that this could also be part of avoiding vulnerability, because you got to believe if a debate were to happen or if he were to participate in a debate, I got to believe he's going to be asked some tough questions and challenged with some very tough situations. So and then last one, splitting. They may perceive situations, people, or themselves in black and white terms, categorizing them as either all good or all bad to protect their self-image. And so that's why, rather than a president being someone who is supposed to heal and unify the entire population, we've observed, for whatever reasons are happening right now, that politics seems to be more and more about polarizing the public. And when you are polarizing the public, you can't polarize and unify at the same time. And so all you're doing is unifying those who resonate with your pole, but as far as bringing people together, it's not there. So I would say to you that if we were able to identify that someone is a narcissist before they even start running for office, what do you think? Should we support that or go like, we know how this turns out? And so that's what it is. I think that I want people to take away from this. We have to be able to recognize when these things are happening. Now, from attention management perspective, if we look at these kinds of behaviors, where on the change grid does someone have to be in order to do any or all of these self-protection? So the grandiosity and bragging, the lack of empathy, the avoidance of criticism, projection. Is this happening in grid where the energy is all about caring? Is this
No,
No. Is this happening down grid where it's
can
things? No. Where is it?
outgrid.
It's out grid. It's out grid. Now, a little bit of it, if they say, like you don't want to debate because you don't want to expose yourself. So you're avoiding vulnerability. Maybe that's a little bit of the upgrid side of things, but I still think it's the upgrid side of outgrid. It's more this expressive driver than it is perhaps even the driven expressive. So because there's a calculation that's really going on. So maybe it's right here, the analytical expressive driver. So again, when we look at something on the change grid, we are also offered the opportunity to see that not all of these behaviors are necessarily bad. There are a lot of those outgrid behaviors where the person is very far upgrid, very much in engagement about what's going on. So being very inspiring and all that sorts of thing. So yeah, there's a little bit of poetic license one can take when they're up there. We can paint a little bit more vivid, let's say, vision than perhaps is really achievable. Or we may talk about a danger as being greater than it is because we're trying to get people to feel what they need to feel in order to understand why we are doing or want to do whatever it is we are doing or want to be doing. So I can kind of see where that could all be happening at. Shags just said that he's not hearing anything. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, all right. So don't know Toy Shags. All right. So now the but I would say to you that most of these narcissistic behaviors are going to be outgrid, and at a certain point, we're going to start seeing things in the outgrid danger zone. So as Shags pointed out early on in this dialogue, Donald Trump has been really cruel to some people. He said really awful things about specific people and continues to do so. And so is that in the danger zone behavior, or is that somehow or another a behavior we can make room for? Or maybe it's this thing where we are now throwing people under the bus. Is that a danger zone behavior, or is that something that's more reasonable?
I think he resides right on the border and lobs those over as needed.
Yeah. Yep. So you're thinking on a good day, let's say that.
Yeah.
On a good day, this is where he would be. That amiable, driven driver. Like, for example, and again, by the way, we have to pull the media into this because the media will very, very often pick and choose, or almost always pick and choose what messages they're going to convey and what meaning they're going to attach to each of those messages. So, for example, I was listening to an analysis on one of the what do you want to call it? The fact-checking sites. In fact, it might have been on all sides, where they were saying that Trump tends to be viewed as being a racist. However, if you actually look at the things that he has said and done, he doesn't display very much evidence at all that would indicate he's a racist. So it's interesting how many of these attributes that we are accusing Donald Trump of having are really things that he's been assigned more than things that he has actually earned, deserved, or whatever. And so you gotta kind of like go, don't believe that any one source is telling you everything that's accurate, truthful, etc. Blah blah blah. That being said, we have to go, well, then we're looking for a preponderance of evidence. Is there more evidence to show that Trump tends to lean further out grid, or is there more evidence to show that he leans in grid? And so the evidence is definitely that he's in the danger zone. This is why I say this frequently now in these most recent days and weeks. Think what you want to think about the man, but I'm telling you, he's his own worst enemy. So is that because of narcissistic personality tendencies? I don't know. All I know is that he does allow himself to say a whole lot of things that obviously his attorneys don't want him saying, that the court itself might actually told him not to say, but he says it anyway. Is it because he can't control himself, or is he doing something calculated, deliberate, in order to try to curry even higher levels of favor with the people that are hearing these messages? Because these messages tend to be delivered on in situations and on platforms that one would say are already populated by his followers. So there's a lot going on. Again, I just wanted to bring up to you guys that there are a great many things that we can observe. And if we can observe that someone's behavior is clear indication that they are a narcissist, what should you do with that information at the individual level? What do you think? You know that someone's a narcissist. Should you be attracted to them? Should you shy away from them? Or should you simply have your eyes wide open?
Eyes wide open.
Eyes wide open. Now, as your eyes are wide open and you see this pattern continuing to play out, and or you see this pattern getting even more, I want to say dramatic, problematic, whatever, what does this tell you? Should you be attracted to it? Should you move away from it? Or should you just continue with your eyes wide open? Now, for me, the answer is continue with your eyes wide open, because I'm trying to get you guys to realize that the center of the change grid is the best place for everyone to really be, because then you can see these things happening, but not get sucked into it. You can see these things happen, but draw your own conclusion, make your own decisions. Maybe, just maybe, you decide to step off center. We'll get into this when we're talking about empaths. You may decide that because this is as problematic as it can be, maybe, just maybe, I need to step out there a little bit, get involved, and see what I can do to help others see the truth, or open their eyes to what's really going on, to protect them there. Shag says it probably depends on whether one considers themselves to be a sheep. Interestingly enough, I don't know that anyone thinks of themselves as being a sheep, but you are most absolutely right. The people that get pulled in to another person's agenda, not just Trump, but anybody and everybody who's out there with an agenda they're trying to win people over to, people are going to blindlessly follow. Those would be the sheep, because to me, the people who actually understand exactly what they're doing, I don't really think they're sheep as much as they might be, shepherds who are in turn trying to build the population of sheep and keep them moving in the direction that the goal wants to have. Remember, no one can achieve greatness in isolation. They have to be around other people, and sooner or later they need an army of sub-commanders, an army of leaders below them to help do the real work of building a true following. Yep. So that's for me. If you observe someone who's got a narcissistic situation going on, you need to observe it. You need to behave accordingly for your own benefit, but you also may decide that it's time to educate others. And whether you choose to go out grid to do that or move up grid to do that, maybe you're more of a researcher and decide to move down grid about that issue to build the case, find the evidence, document things, etc. And maybe you might lean to the amiable side of things and say, he's a human too, and maybe we need to kind of support him at discovering the best version of himself that we can, Now, I would say too, as we work our way around these 4 possibilities for getting involved, still inside of the green circle, it might be very interesting to go, well, how many people are over here on the amiable side of things? Who's downgrid about the whole thing? Again, the documenters. Who's out there trying to persuade, to lead others to the awareness that we're talking about, and how many are kind of painting the picture of the negative consequences we're likely to encounter if this individual continues to be able to move forward. Okay. So thoughts about what we've been talking about today. Do you guys find this interesting? I'm always afraid to bring it up, but I do believe it's something that people with an understanding of tension management should be able to handle. And that should enable you to do an even more effective job at identifying and responding to whatever's going on. Yeah. Okay. Now, it's not just someone who's narcissism lives out grid. That's why I've been squiggling around out grid. But we also have people in our world today that are very, very much up grid. And they are building their case for all sorts of things. But when you start to really talk to them about it, although they also have Dunning-Kruger, but they really don't have the level of ability they think they have. So in this category, I want to put or have a discussion at some point in time. Obviously, I'd like to move on to a different topic on Thursday, but as I hear more and more people who are talking about gender identity, gender dysphoria, all this sort of stuff, I'm starting to recognize that when these individuals are challenged, they really don't know their stuff. And they find themselves unable to really address something. So, for example, I don't know the athlete's name, but it's one of these situations where someone who is a biological male has now been competing in female sporting events and obviously winning because of the advantages the male might have physiologically to do this kind of thing. The thing is that this particular individual does not identify themselves as a trans woman. They identify themselves as non-binary. Well, if you're identifying yourself as non-binary, then shouldn't you be in the non-binary sports world? I mean, you're saying I'm non-binary. That means I'm not a man and I'm not a woman. Then why are you competing in women's events? To take it further, they're not receiving any kind of treatment whatsoever. So there's no gender reassignment surgeries happening. There's no hormonal work that's happening either. The individual has simply declared that they are non-binary and now they're in women's sports. Well, if you aren't even taking any hormones or anything, you're doing nothing because they're going like, I'm non-binary, I'm neither. Well, there's a problem there. And when we start to ask questions about it, that's when you start getting people who obviously think they know far more about a situation than they really know. So going on what David started off, I wanted to say that generally speaking, people with Dunning-Kruger are going to initially display themselves as being particularly far high on the ability scale, but they could see a different range. When they are out here and they want to get on news programs and they want to fight with you and all this sort of stuff, and they start getting challenged, it's interesting how they move up grid instead of out grid. They realize that they're not going to be able to win the fight because they don't know how to answer particular questions. And so they're going to end up moving up grid. So are you guys noticing any of that sort of a thing? Or am I the only one who caught this, this interesting little interview? Thoughts about this? No, you're all muted. So, all right. Well, with that, then we're at the top of the hour, so we can go ahead and be finished for today. Again, my goal is, as you guys understand, we're talking about, can you identify for yourself when these extremes are occurring, and then can you keep yourself inside of that green circle so you are in no way damaged by whatever's happening around you, and also you are positioned to be able to not only protect yourself, but maybe be of service to others who are falling under the spell of any of these four extremes. All right, questions, comments? All right, then. Thank you very much for joining in. We'll talk again on Thursday. So bye, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Bye for now.